Hello, friends, and welcome to our SBT Sunday teaching. Today is a very special Sunday. It's Christmas Eve, and I wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Of course, my name is Tenzin Tarpa. Before we begin our class, let's take a moment to appreciate our community gathered here today. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing the present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And let's remember, as conscientious practitioners, we must recognize our responsibility to the world, to strive to live skillfully while helping others to do the same, to strive to live in balance and harmony with nature and others, to strive to gain mastery over our minds and embody our true benevolent nature, to expand our hearts and minds and transcending our shared human limitations, to not intentionally harm sentient life or our planet, and to maturely accept and embrace the reality of our situation while striving to improve it. And again, welcome to our Sunday teaching. So I thought we would keep this teaching tonight just light and review some material that I wanted to get to, being that it's Christmas Eve. We've recently just released an updated version of our practice guides, and we've also updated the practices in our training as well. And I thought it would be really great for new people to SBT to have a video showing and explaining how we train and practice with SBT. So, as we mentioned some of our material, there's three kind of aspects to engaging with Buddhism. There's study, which most people do by reading some books. Maybe you've watched some podcasts or watched some videos of Buddhist teachers on YouTube, and you find some interest in it. The other one is practice, and practice can be learning how to meditate, the practice of mindfulness, and there's other practices as well. And I think either one of those is how probably most people find their way to Buddhism and engage with Buddhism, either finding something interesting. For myself, somebody gave me a fascinating book. I think it was a book by the Dalai Lama some 30 years ago that really captivated me and got me interested in Buddhism. But other people might have taken a meditation course, or maybe because of their health, their doctor recommended them to learn meditation. But either one of those is usually the way people find their way to Buddhism. And these are two very important aspects of Buddhism. But then there's also the aspect of training. And sadly, training is the part of Buddhism that there isn't much focus on nowadays. When you join Western Buddhist groups or spiritual groups or meditation or mindfulness groups, it's usually just about some study, some reading, and some meditation. But training is quite possibly the most important of all of them. So important that the Buddha wrote a whole category of teaching material called Vinaya, specifically about training. And so training is involved in, oftentimes we think of training as taking vows or taking precepts of ethical behavior, virtuous behavior, which starts with refuge, taking refuge in Buddhism. And from there, there's deeper levels of training that you can go through, depending on your level of commitment and how far you wish to engage with Buddhism. It's always voluntarily, and it's a question of just how deep do you want your practice to go. For some people, refuge is fine. Other people, they like to go deeper. With SBT, we put a lot of emphasis, as the Buddha did, on training. Of course, all three are holistic. They all depend on each other. All three are needed. But we like to bring back a really good balance of the three with SBT. Okay, so with that said, I wanted to explain what training and practice in SBT involves, and as well as explain the new practice guides that we have. So, and all of this material can be downloaded from our website. So I'd like to share this. So when beginning training, the first training is given when we take refuge, taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. And I'll just read from here. This is refuge level daily training and practice. So once you've taken refuge in a refuge ceremony, this is what these are the training and practices that you are given and expected to follow. So the essence of the Buddhist path lies in the threefold training, and this is different than the three aspects of Buddhism that I just talked about. We talked about study, practice, and training. These are three aspects of training itself, and it's training in virtue, training in understanding, and training in awareness, which are cultivated through study, contemplation, and meditation, and practice. At refuge level, daily training and practice consists of upholding one's refuge vows that you receive during your ceremony. I have light shining in the window. Okay. And with refuge vows, there's 10 precepts for refuge. They're the first ones you receive. And basically what they're precepts of awakened behavior. And they're aspirational, and they're 10 aims to cultivate working towards awakening. So the first things we do in training is upholding those vows, precepts, and then there's commitments as well. Commitments of practice. You're expected to recite morning affirmations and other affirmations and things for meditation, for meals. And then commitments of practice, and also commitments of saying your refuge vow every day, of purifying your vows every month during our purification ceremony, which is the last Sunday of every month. And so those commitments are there regardless of what level you're at. So when we talk about different levels, we're talking about different levels of training. So this is the initial level of training. And then at this level of refuge, we have the cultivation of the Four Noble Truths, which is developed through the practices of the four tasks, the Eightfold Path, and abiding on the breath and shining. So these are all various practices with SBT. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier. Refuge is the first level of training, but we do have study guides for two other levels. The first is novice level. So novice is a person who is new, possibly new to Buddhism. They haven't taken vows yet. They haven't dug into any specific practices. And that practice guide is just a handful of affirmations. It's just a way to cultivate their practice and to give them some structure and guidance for the practice during the day. And then the next level we have is a skillful living level. This also doesn't have any vows that are committed to. This is for people that have gone through our skillful living program, and it's a way of giving them structure in their practice of the various practices that we teach in that level. And then, but when people become serious about their practice, you'll want to engage in training. The difference between practice and training is oftentimes practice is something that we do when we have time for it, when we feel like it, right? We meditate sometime and others. But when it comes to training, the biggest part is the commitment to practice. You're making a commitment a commitment of daily practice. So this is where we become serious in our practice, right? When people become serious about Buddhism, when people really want to get a result from their practice, when they're ready to commit, they begin their training. So commitment is the key difference between those. Okay, so getting back to this, the cultivation of the Four Noble Truths, and we know the Four Noble Truths over here as being the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation or stopping of suffering, and the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, the Eightfold Path. So this is something that we study, a great example of study, but also we want to cultivate it and embody it. And so we do that through the Eightfold Path here, which is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So this is the path that leads to awakening. Right? This is the Buddhist prescribed method of awakening. But then we can also cultivate the Four Noble Truths themselves. And the Buddha gave these instructions of a practice called the Four Tasks. And the Buddha suggested that there's 4 tasks for each one of the 4 truths. And the first is suffering are to be known. Known here means understood. And we do that through study, learning about them, learning all we can about suffering, going to classes, reading books, and then we contemplate it. And contemplation, for me, I always think of, after I've studied it, I go to the back porch with a big cup of coffee and I sit down and I try to digest what I've studied and say, now, exactly what does that mean, right? This is contemplate, think about those ideas. And then we meditate on it. And this means going to our cushion and engaging in insight meditation on suffering, where we get the deepest contemplation. So this is called the 3 great objectives: study, contemplation, and meditation. So we engage with that to know suffering. And through that knowing, through that understanding, we arm ourselves with the knowledge to possibly transcend it. So that's how we start. The second one is the causes are to be abandoned. So once we understand what suffering is, and through that we understand its causes, we can then work to, I often like the word transcend more than abandon. We can learn to rise above those, and we can learn to stop creating that suffering within our lives, because a great deal of the suffering that we deal with in our lives is self-inflicted. The number 3 is their cessation are to be actualized. And this means actually the experience of presence, stillness, and awakening. So through understanding suffering and transcending the causes of it, we're able to transcend suffering itself, right? And that's what this means, to actualize the ending of suffering. And number 4 tells us how to do it, that the Eightfold Path is to be relied upon. So they're not necessarily in any correct order. I think we start off with the first one, knowing it, right? Knowing our suffering. The Eightfold Path we rely on for it. Well, I think the first two we study, and then we rely on the Eightfold Path to actualize the third one, the cessation, the actual awakening, transcending our suffering. So the four tasks are actually what we use to embody the Four Noble Truths, to lift them off the page and to make them worthwhile and important in our lives, right? We lift them off the page by practicing the four tasks. So all of these work together. The the Eightfold Path, there's a few different methods out. Different teachers assert different ways that these are supposed to be cultivated. Some teachers swear that they're linear and you have to accomplish each one in a row. But the majority of teachers believe that they're that they're practiced all at the same time, that they're holistic, that one doesn't. There is no one starting point. There is some things that people agree upon, and that is that the first one, right view, quite possibly that's a starting point, but it's clearly the end point as well, because right view, having the right perspective or understanding the true nature of ourselves and reality, is synonymous with awakening itself. So, anyways, we practice the Eightfold Path holistically. We practice all of them at the same time to cultivate them all equally. So when we're at refuge level, that's the main practices. So back again to the top, we have the four tasks, the Eightfold Path. This is what we're actually working on cultivating every day. And we have a practice called abiding on the breath. Abiding on the breath is a practice of presence. It's keeping a little bit of our awareness on our breath at all times, whatever we're doing, just a little bit there. And that keeps us present. That keeps us in the here and now. And it's actually quite a simple practice, but it's quite a profound practice. And then the practice of shining comes from our Skillful Living program. And I'll let you read about that in the practice guides. There's a piece on how to practice shining. But in a sense, it's learning how to shine with all your beautiful talents and abilities and benevolent qualities, learning how to let them pour out into the world. So this is the first level of training, is refuge level. Now, we would suggest that people take refuge and practice this training for about a year, depending on the aptitude of the student and their experience. And the idea is that each training is built upon the next. So especially the practice of abiding on the breath, because our next practices are going to build upon that. Okay, so now this might be enough training for anyone for their whole life. As you can imagine, this is an amazing practice. And of course, this is the Buddhist prescribed method for awakening. So this can be enough for anyone. But if for those that wish to deepen their practice, and after really embodying these practices, and they feel like they're ready to add something to it and possibly develop a deeper practice, those people can move on to Bodhisattva vows. Bodhisattva vows are an aspect of the Mahayana path of Buddhism. And so here we have the same basic idea. All of our practices, all of our training fit in the threefold training of virtue, understanding, and awareness. So let me explain a little bit about that. So when we talk about training in virtue, we're really talking about just basic goodness, training in being a good human being a person who's good to others. Now, we're all pretty good at it, but imagine if you could really work at it and really train in it. Just imagine how good you could get at it, right? This is the idea of Buddhism. We believe with some proper application, some proper study, and some proper practices, we can become extraordinary at this, and we can become incredibly virtuous and good people, right? So this is what training in virtue is. Some people call it ethics. Sometimes I just call it goodness. But this is the foundation for all Buddhism. Buddhism begins with this idea of virtue. And the three of these are all holistic. There's not one that's more important than others, though virtue is the foundation. Then we have training and understanding. Understanding is the wisdom and insight aspect of the path. And this is learning about things. And now most people assume that this means study. And it does, but again, we use the three great objectives of study, contemplation, and meditation, because meditation is a profound practice for gaining insight and understanding, especially when we're practicing insight meditation. But training and understanding isn't just conceptual understanding. You also have to remember it's experiential as well. It's understanding the world around you through your own experiences, right? Through the things that you see, through understanding yourself and understanding others. So I'd like everyone to have a very expanded view of what we mean by training and understanding. Understanding can be going to classes, it could be reading books, but it's also living life and experimenting with things and learning from the people around you, yeah? Then we have training in awareness. And this is training in cultivating higher mental and meditative states. Now, this begins simply with simple practices of presence, which is following the breath and being present in the present moment. It can then be expanded into an experience of stillness, which is a deeper experience and practice of presence. That in turn can go deeper into experiences of emptiness, and then leading to nirvana and full awakening. So as you can see, there's a spectrum of awareness, right? We call this consciousness, we can call this awareness. Some people call it single-pointed concentration, but that's only a small part of it. But we have the spectrum of awareness and perspective, right? How we see the world, how our senses are taking in the world, what we're making it, how we're interpreting it, how we're projecting our views onto the world. It's really how we take in the world itself. This is training in awareness. Now, when you've been a meditator for a while and you get into some of these deeper, amazing states, you gain great information and understanding about the world, about your own awareness, and you're able to engage the world in a much different way. And hopefully, with this awareness and this idea of presence, we have these qualities of patience and understanding of others, right? This idea of patience. We have non-reactivity, where we're not so reactive in the world. We learn to calm down. We learn to slow down. We lose that neurotic busyness that everybody seems to have, right? That neurotic busyness that sees everything as being so immediate and so important, that our self-importance, all of this lets go, and we start to see the true nature of reality, right? Through these experiences, we start to see the world as it truly is. So these all come together to form awakening. The cultivation and achievement of the threefold training is full awakening itself. So if anybody asks you what practices you do, It's an easy question, easy answer. You say the threefold training. Now, each one of these training practice levels that we're talking about, they all fit into the threefold training. Everything in Buddhism fits into the threefold training, everything we do. But that gives you a little bit of an outline of it all. Now, what do we do with the Bodhisattva level? So we've taken refuge. We've been practicing refuge and studying and practicing and training for about a year. We've now started to habituate these qualities, right? We say our affirmations every morning. We're familiar with the practices. We've noticed they've made a big change in us. And now they've become kind of second nature. And now we'd like to see if we can add to it. Can I deepen my practice? At this point, you might go to your teacher and say, I'm interested in taking my practice a little bit more seriously and deepening my practice to get more of that result that I'm enjoying. At this point, you ask your teacher if you could take Bodhisattva vows. Bodhisattva vows are 26 precepts that are added to the 10 precepts of refuge. And they're basically oriented around altruism and compassion. That's the big difference between them. Refuge vows are a lot about basic do's and don'ts in life and proper behavior, right? Proper skill for productive behavior and non-productive behavior. Whereas Bodhisattva vows are a lot more about our intentions and our attitude, and it's an outpouring of our care for others. And at this level, we continue to uphold all the practices, training, and commitments in refuge, because now they're second nature. That's a piece of cake. Now we're going to add these next precepts on top of that. And it comes with vows, precepts, and commitments like refuge does. And then also we're going to engage in some new practices. So on top of the Eightfold Path, we're going to add the 6 perfections, which are supreme generosity, supreme goodness, supreme patience, supreme effort, supreme concentration, and supreme wisdom. Those are added upon that. And the reason we use that word supreme is because we're not talking about everyday qualities, because most of us are fairly generous and good and patient. But we're talking now these qualities at the level of an awakened being. And again, it's aspirational. We're not saying that you can do it now. We're saying we're going to work towards those goals. So we think about, like the first one, generosity. We're not talking about regular old generosity. We're talking about the generosity of a bodhisattva or a Buddha, which would just be incredible, right? So we're trying to elevate our practices at that level. So we have the 6 perfections that are added to it. There's also a practice called mind training, which is a practice used, I always think it should be called heart training, but it's the practice for cultivating bodhicitta, or the mind, the altruistic mind of awakening, a mind that is deeply connected to the care and compassion towards others. And then on top of that, our practice of abiding on the breath, which we've been practicing for a year, now we're able to shift into a practice called abiding in emptiness. Okay, so the 6 perfections, I think, is straightforward. I don't need to mention that. The mind training is just, we do it in about a week. We haven't done it for a while. We should do it again. But it's a contemplation on various topics. And basically, it's supposed to create more compassion and empathy for others. And it works. It's a wonderful practice. So now, abiding in emptiness is basically the same practice as abiding on the breath, where we still follow the breath, we still keep a little bit of our attention on the breath at all times. But now we also bring in the concept, the ideas, the philosophy of emptiness in Buddhism on top of it. And we're trying to see the world in a deeper way. We're trying to see and ascertain the true nature of reality itself. Emptiness is a topic I am not going to get into here. It's a very deep topic. But there's a beautiful piece in the practice guides at the Bodhisattva level that you can read about that. And as well, they're on the website too. So again, on top of the refuge vows, when you're ready, come these Bodhisattva level training. And these are applied on top of those. Now, the next level for those, again, who wish to deepen their practice further, people would take Bodhisattva levels, and again, they would, maybe for a year, they would practice these new ones on top of the refuge. And when they start to become habituated and they're embodied and the practitioner wishes to take it deeper, we have another practice, another level of training, lay ordination. So lay ordination is a new thing in Buddhism. Traditionally, Buddhism just has a division of monastic, which is monks and nuns, and lay people, which is men and women, lay practitioners. But nowadays, it seems like we needed an extra category because we have so many people nowadays that practice and train like monastics. And we also have monastics who I think would much rather live a more lay life. So with many people asking me to do so, SBT has started a lay ordination program and training. And so again, this fits within the threefold training. And again, it's founded on refuge vows and then Bodhisattva vows. And then now there's 46 new precepts to lay ordination, and there's commitments. And again, each level of training, each deeper level of training adds more precepts. And an easy way to understand why we're taking the precepts. The precepts outline awakened behaviors and characteristics that we're trying to attain. In a sense, the precepts paint a picture of what an awakened being is. And so with each new level of training and with each extra set of precepts, we're becoming more and more focused on perfecting that outline and painting that picture of exactly what an awakened being is and how they would behave. So they're precepts of awakened behavior and attitude and perspective, right? Okay, so with that said, again, we start with refuge, then Bodhisattva. Now, in cultivating the lay ordination vows, we have we're working on cultivating awakening. And there's only a single practice that we add here. And this practice is called taking the result as the path. And it's a fascinating practice that actually comes from Tantric Buddhism. And it's a practice in which we imagine ourselves as awakened beings. And we use that image as a compass, as a direction, as a focus to work towards, to attain those qualities. So from the practice of abiding on the breath, we add the aspects of emptiness, the understanding of the true nature of reality to deepen that. These are the practices of awareness. And then once we get to that point, then we add taking the result as the path to go even deeper. So those three are directly related to our training in awareness. And so I'd like to point out, to make this simple, for each one of the trainings, there's really two simple things that we're doing. The first is you're upholding the vows, precepts, and commitments for that level. For refuge level, it's focused on the Four Noble Truths, period, right? There's different practices there, but they're all there in order to accomplish or cultivate or attain an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. For Bodhisattva level, again, we have vows, precepts, and commitments. The Bodhisattva level is focused on cultivating bodhicitta, the altruistic mind of awakening. And often in our prayer, we say, may I awaken in order to benefit all beings. That gives you an idea of that attitude, of that intention of bodhicitta. And then with lay ordination, we're focusing directly on cultivating awakening itself. Once we have all those practices, so you can see, I'm hoping I'm painting a picture how all of these practices fit together, right? This is training in SBT, and we believe that this is a practice of training that actually leads to awakening. How about we take some questions? Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on any of these? We have many people here that have taken different ones. I'm going to stop sharing this. I can put it up if anybody needs it. Do you understand your training? Here we have different people at different levels of training. Did I help to clarify what they are? Yeah? Good. Does anybody have any questions about them? Yes, Ms. Wangmo.
Would you mind talking very briefly about the path from lay ordained to monastic?
Sure. So I didn't have this on the list because we haven't actually started it yet. We haven't started our monastic training program, but it is written and finished. The vows are there, all the practices are there. Basically, they do the same practices, lay ordained or monastic ordained. But again, each level, basically, we do it for the same reason, because we want to get deeper into our practice, right? Each level of training is a deeper commitment. And therefore, the hope is you get a greater result from it. We started lay ordination for the fact that many people simply couldn't do a monastic path, right? The monastic path is an intense one. You know, the idea is that you renounce lay life so you can spend all your time awakening, that the only focus of your life is awakening, right? 24/7. You can imagine if someone can do such a thing, the results should be pretty impressive. You know, so basically that's what it is. Now, some people would look at it and say, well, monastic life is more restrictive. They look at it as more things you can't do, right? Which there's some truth to, but there's an old saying that some people look at their vows as restrictions. I have to paraphrase. They're the things, the things you can't do. Other people look at them as things they're liberated from. And I always found the second to be true. I always found that every one of my vows liberates me from those activities. And I find great freedom in my vows. I don't feel them as binding. I think that they're a source of amazing freedom. So it's up to you how you see your vows. But straightforward, there's monastics, of course, are celibate. Monastics aren't permitted to work for profit. Monastics have a vow of poverty. Monastics have a vow of homelessness. I mean, and we purposely made it an intense path because for those people that wanted such a thing, like myself, the monastic path for me is just absolutely wonderful. Greatest thing I ever did. So, but it's not for everybody. So with SBT, we have all of these different trainings that people can decide for themselves what works for them, how deep they want to go. Yeah. So that was the hope, that we could really help everybody in that way. And if you remember, we always talk about that SBT was created for one purpose, to support practitioners. Really, I try to keep it at that. When I think about SBT, when I'm working on programs and things, the thought is, how can I support practitioners? We don't expect anything in return. Donations are nice. We live on donations, but this isn't about, we're not looking for a commitment from people. We're there for you. And so we offer a curriculum, we offer training for people that believe that it'll benefit their spiritual path. Yeah. And for people that don't, they don't have to take them. In fact, people can do our very highest practices without taking any vows or commitments at all. It's completely up to them. Yeah. Yunta?
Yeah, about suffering. The first the first truth is very kind of self-evident. There is suffering. And then the third truth, that there's an end to suffering, seems to be a huge claim. And I earlier this week I was walking the dog and I was thinking, well, I mean, it makes sense if, the Buddha was this prince who was living this enclosed life where there was no suffering, he'd suddenly be shocked by the fact that there is suffering. And then perhaps he'd want to bring it to an end. Whereas most of us just grow up and have to learn to deal with it. And so I was thinking, like, how original was what he did with suffering? Is that like a original teaching of Buddhism? Or would that have been implied in all of the other religions, like his previous teacher taught union with the absolute, whatever that is? But I mean, would it have been implied within union with the absolute that, you're now free of suffering? Was this a big thing at the time? Was it in like his general society?
Yeah, I think so. I think for most of the religions, their eye is more on salvation. I think the focus of all of those is more on winning God's grace and being anointed with some incredible state of being, kind of a magical thing, right? In Hinduism and in Tantra, they talk about becoming sorcerers of the universe. So I think a lot of religions there's kind of this thought that's more in this way, where Buddhism really took a different approach. Instead of being focused on attaining this spiritual grace and being removed from the world, Buddhism does the opposite and says, why don't we take a real good look at suffering? Let's do the opposite. Let's explore suffering itself, and let's see if we can remedy it. And in a sense, what we're saying is that Buddhism believed that we ourselves could liberate ourselves from suffering. It's not dependent on being liberated by an external force, where all the other religions are. You could only be liberated from all of this through the grace of a God, according to other religions, right? And so Buddhism was quite different. It was much more of a humanistic
so it was quite an original
path.
thought and an original contribution to spirituality at the time.
Seemed quite original, yeah. And just the thought, it was more secular. It was the idea of we liberate ourselves from suffering. We're not appeasing. We're not making offerings to gods.
Okay.
All right. Jains were a little like that, but not as much as the Buddha. Yeah. Then you talked about another thing that was interesting. You talked about suffering, and well, one last point. The story of the Buddha's awakening and living in the palace and seeing suffering. They say that's the same story for all the Buddhas, every Buddha. In fact, I think I read somewhere where the original story of the Buddha wasn't a story of him, but was a story of his predecessor before him. But when we talk about suffering as the first noble truth, and we talk about the cessation of suffering, the third noble truth, now most of the Buddhist traditions, they have this absolute idea that It's the end of any and all suffering of any kind. That it's absolute purity of all afflictions and limitations, which, yeah, sounds pretty hard to believe. I think in some ways, though, for traditional Buddhism, the idea is that after a Buddha passes away and they're no longer reborn with a body and a human mind, that would be the ultimate sensation, because clearly the Buddha, became awakened, but he still suffered greatly in his life up to his death. There's enough information about that. So yeah, there's nothing straightforward about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we can all work towards awakening. We can all work towards limiting our suffering and getting to a place where, we find happiness. Yeah. David, is your arm sore?
It's not really my arm. I've just got. Yeah, it's just a practical issue that just crossed my mind, Tarpa, as you're in how to expand the monastic order when there isn't a tradition in the West of donations and supporting monks. I mean, how
the answer is really simple. I just don't think that way. What I think about is how do I support people that want to take up monasticism? I don't think about it the other way. How do I make a monastic order? How do we increase a monastic order? I just don't think that way. I get quite a few emails weekly at people that want to become monastics. So the idea is that how can I do that? And it would be done just like everything SBT does through donations. And so hopefully there's a situation where we're able to have enough donations to do that. We also would need a monastery for monastics to live in. So yes, that's one of the reasons we don't have it running right now, is because it's a really big step for SBT. But I'm determined to be able to offer that, because there's so many people like myself that are in love with monasticism, but would like to do it in a secular way. So that needs to be available to people. And then on the monk side, monks live in a very simple way, so we're not a burden upon the lay. So it's a little bit of a trade-off each way. But the way I see it is that if we keep all our expenses very low, and that it's something that we could do in the future. I think if we do good work, people want to support us. And, our commitment to that everything in SBT is free and always will be.
Yeah, I see.
So we're a big experiment, to be honest with you. And we're an experiment, seeing if we can do a tradition in the right way, and to avoid the pitfalls of the other ones, all the money and abuse and all that. Can we do it? Can we have a safety net in place so we don't safeguards in place so we don't fall into those traps? One of the great things about staying in over 60 monasteries in every Buddhist country across the world, from the top of the Himalayas, from Mongolia, Thailand, everywhere, is I got to see all the ways not to run a monastery or how not to run a tradition. And I got to see what the problems that they dealt with. And so maybe we're arrogant thinking that we have a chance at doing it the right way. But I can't think of any other aim in life that is as noble. What a beautiful, noble thing. And a lot of people lose. Sometimes I run across a bit of negativity against monasticism, and it's basically that people don't quite understand it very well. I think people see it as religious, and they see it as authoritative, and of course they rebel against that. But they so rarely take the time to look at the beauty of it, or a simple fact that the Buddha himself was a monk. People forget this. the Buddha was the first monk, and the Buddha made monks. I mean, out of all the things he did, making monastics was front and center in Buddhism. And of course, he valued everyone. He believed that there were four types of practitioners in his order. There was male monastic, female monastic, male lay, male female, and lay female, and they were all equal. So we'll carry that through in ours as well. But monasticism is, to see the commitment that people make to take that level of renunciation in order to awaken, in many cases for the benefit of others, right? With the Bodhisattva ideal, I think people lose track of the beauty of it. It's an incredible path. It's a beautiful, beautiful path of selflessness. Yeah.
I must say, I think that vision, Tarpa, is very inspirational. I think just magnificent.
Yeah, I mean, I've met bad monks that didn't, they didn't really want to be monks. Their parents just made them. But I've met the most extraordinary people that are just truly focused on awakening, that there's nothing more important in their lives than that, and doing so to benefit others. And there's such a beauty to it. That's the part people don't see, and it's not their fault. I think, especially in the West, we kind of have a society of a cynicism. We're supposed to be mistrusting of things, and maybe sometimes it's a good thing so we don't get suckered into bad ideas and cults and things like that. But I often try to point that out to people that are negative, and say, just take some time and try to reflect on the beauty of monasticism, because it is a truly beautiful path. And for me to keep the Buddha Sangha of monasticism alive, this is a thing that I'm very interested in. There's a reason I called it the Secular Buddhist Tradition, because from the very beginning, before any of you folks were here, my idea was to start secular monasticism and to keep monasticism alive. People are always saying to me that monasticism is dead. It's not gonna be somewhere. We're not gonna practice that in the West. And I'm sure throughout history, the monasticism has had a strong focus and had a weaker points. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to say it. It's been popular and not popular. Over 2,000 years, there's been a lot of ebb and flow, ups and downs. But the idea is that for maybe 2,600 years, it's been continuous. And monks were the Buddha's idea. Supposedly, Buddhists were the first monks. So to me, it's an extraordinary thing that's worth continuing. Even if it's just a handful of people, it doesn't matter. Sorry if I went on there for a little bit.
Thank you.
I thought today was going to be a light, short teaching. What happened?
What happened was you tried to summarize the whole of SBT in about 45 minutes.
Boy, you pour a cup of coffee into this monk and he just keeps chatting. We're coming up to the end of our chat. I wanted to share one last thing. I wanted to show everybody where all this information's from can be found. So anyways, this is our website. And if you come up here at the top where it says downloads, you can click on that. And then in our download library, we start off with study and practice material. This is just some of our text. Then we have supplemental text. We have a brand new SBT glossary of Buddhist terms. People have been asking for this for years for me. I finally got it done and I posted it. Please enjoy it. And it needs some updating, but it's in pretty good shape. But if you come down a little bit further, we have right here our SBT practice guides. Now, each one is built upon the last. So the first one, the novice level, doesn't have information from the later ones, but it's a simple text. So the first button here, the PDF, is the guide itself, which is, it has a lot of supplemental material. But the actual daily practice of reciting affirmations, I made really easy by having a PDF form. And we also have a PDF dark, which I love because when I wake up in the morning and the lights are off and I'm meditating and I say my prayers, I turn on my tablet, that white light just blinds me. So for me, I made mine black with white letters to make it easier. And I thought you would all probably enjoy the same. And then we also have an audio of myself reciting the morning practice. And it's up to you what kind of combination you like to do. If you like reading them, listening to them, or a combination of them. If you're running late, you can play the audio in the car on the way to work. Then we have Skillful Living. The Skillful Living Practice Guide is for people who have completed the Skillful Living program. We are starting the Skillful Living program at the first of the year. I think it starts on January 8th, that's 2024. So we'd love you to come. They have the same practices here. Then we get into training with Refuge Level. Again, there's the practice guide itself, and then we have the shorter daily practices. And then Bodhisattva level, and then lay ordained level. At the bottom, we have a daily practice. We have evening contemplation. This is in the guide, but this is just a short MP3 for it. And then people requested that I had an open intro to meditation, meaning there isn't an end to it, so they could meditate as long as they want. And I have two. I have a basic meditation, which gives all of the instructions and then just stops and you can meditate for hours, and the advanced meditation, which has less instructions and it does the same. Okay, and besides that, I wanted to show you one more thing. For a lot of the supplemental material that's in the practice guides, but you can also find it in programs. For example, if we come down here to refuge vows, this takes you to the refuge page. Then at the bottom of the refuge page, we have we have the refuge vows themselves, but we have a button, study material. We have this at the bottom of each one of the programs. And the study material takes you to just that. These are videos, there's text, and we keep compiling and putting new information. We'll put this video we're doing now on there as well. So that's available in all of the different program pages on the website. Choki.
Oh, I just wanted to say for the video, you said that Skillful Living starts on the 8th. It starts on the 7th, Sunday the 7th.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it starts on, it's every Sunday. Yeah, very good. Are there any last questions before we end with today's teaching? I hope that was helpful. I wanted to clarify some of those points to everybody, and we'll make the video available, so anytime you have any questions about your practice, you can reflect upon that, okay? I think I'll do some short videos of this and put them on the study material as well. Okay, with that said, why don't we end today's teaching with an altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening. Thanks everybody for joining me on Christmas Eve and making it a lot of fun. And we'll see you all tomorrow for meditation. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.